Hey guys, it's Chris Camera Guy, and I'm back. And I want to tell you a story. It's going to be something very difficult to talk about, but I do feel that it's important because it's a cautionary tale. Today, we're going to talk about a wolf in sheep's clothing, a pathological sadistic liar, a charlatan, and a grifter, a magnetic Christian cult leader who rose to fame in California. He claimed to be able to release demonic entities from people, cure drug addictions, and even heal the sick. I think by now you can all guess who I'm talking about. Friends, today I'm going to be talking about the Reverend Jim Jones. This evangelical preacher led nearly 1,000 of his followers from the United States into the jungles of South America, where atrocious crimes were committed against humanity. Stick around to the end, and I'll give you 5 tips on spotting a cult leader, so you don't end up a victim. Alright guys, let's get right into it. Jim Jones was born on May 13th, 1931 in Indiana to parents Lynetta and James Jones. Jim's father, James, was a veteran of World War I who lived on disability payments due to being a victim of a gas attack during his time in the war. Sadly, James suffered from PTSD and was really bitter about what had happened to him during his time in the service. As a result of his trauma, he was detached and non-affectionate toward his family and coped with his problems through alcoholism. During the 1930s, it was the goal of most ladies to have a family and live a life as a respectable Christian woman. Lynetta, Jim's mother, was no Susie homemaker. She wasn't very maternal. In fact, she showed zero interest in motherhood. Lynetta was extremely unorthodox for her time. Not only was Lynetta disinterested in being a mom, she also did not believe in God. They weren't exactly the Cleavers. It didn't sound like a happy, picturesque household. However, despite his upbringing and parental influence, James was a charismatic character and found it fairly easy to gain popularity within his peer group. He was already showing strong leadership qualities early on in his life, and as a young boy, he became interested in baseball. And while Jim wasn't a great athlete per se, he was a great leader and formed a pretty good team with the other guys from his neighborhood. When he got his mind set on something, his tenacious nature would come out. When Jim became obsessed with religion, he even joined 5 churches in his town. He would finish Mass at one church, he would run across town to another congregation to join their Mass as well. He always wore formal church-type attire to his high school and would regularly preach the word of God in the streets of the town square. Jim got his first job at a hospital doing janitorial work. It was there where he met his wife-to-be, Marceline. She was a godly young woman and was very taken by the kind nature and the compassion he showed for the patients, made her fall deeply in love with Jim. Jim loved working at the hospital because he felt like he was serving a purpose by helping out the sick and the elderly. At one point, he almost considered a job in medicine, but Jim knew in his heart that his true calling was spreading the gospel. He wanted to be a spiritual leader, so he made the decision to go to school as a student pastor instead. Jim only lasted as a student pastor for about a year. He didn't take kindly to being told what to do and wanted a sense of independence. So in 1956, at the young age of 25, Jones decided to part ways with his mentors and opened his own church in Indianapolis called the People's Temple. This church was unique and unlike anything else people had ever seen. He had an interesting blend of ideologies at his church, which was Christian-based, mixed with some New Age-type teachings and a heavy emphasis for social justice and racial equality. Jim Jones didn't believe in segregation, It was one of the first churches ever to integrate races. And due to the popularity of his stance on racial issues, the congregation quickly grew a large, loyal following that consisted mostly of people from lower-income black communities. Marceline didn't agree with all the blending in religious beliefs and preferred more of a traditional Christian stance. But he was her husband, and she loved him and felt that it was her duty as a wife to support him no matter what. So that's exactly what she did. Marceline assisted him in all the back-end work. As the church grew bigger, it started becoming too small to accommodate all the new followers that they had attracted. So he had to come up with a plan to make enough money to relocate to a new building. And unfortunately for Jim, the demographic of the members of his church were mostly low-income, struggling people. So there wasn't much money for the donation plate, so he had to do something to really grab the attention of the masses. And Jim became a PR dream to further his credibility and cement his image as a social justice hero. Jim began setting up peaceful protests in town. He was fighting for all the black people because during that time in history, many African Americans weren't allowed to eat at certain restaurants or shop at certain stores, and his protests worked. And they began serving black people at their establishments. He even went as far as adopting a black child and named him Jim Jones Jr. And I'm not joking, folks. You really can't make this stuff up. But being the ambitious person that Jim was, he knew that the dream of leading a mega church would take much more than just having a caring image. He needed money. He needed to be a superstar. So to spruce up his sermons, he decided to start performing miracles. Jim didn't deliver demons right off the bat. He was aware that folks are generally wary of this type of evangelism, so he started small, and with the power of suggestion, he began curing people from headaches and coughs. And the word spread around town that there was a pastor who could cure people's coughs and headaches. Naturally, this drew larger and larger crowds, and he began passing around the collection plates, and the profits were growing each and every week. Jones realized that he was a rising star within the Christian community. In order to grow his popularity even more, he began doing guest spots at surrounding churches, essentially trying to extract new fans and followers from other congregations. To beef up his performance up to the next level, he began enlisting some of his inner circle to give false testimonies of his healing abilities. And they would say that they were sick and Jim had healed them through the power of Christ. High cholesterol, diabetes, heart issues. Jim Jones was curing it all, and this led the mesmerized churchgoers from other congregations to join Jones. The money was flowing in just as he planned, but Jim got greedy and wanted more money, and he knew his claims of miracles and healings had to be even more outrageous. So he went as far as to hire followers from his inner circle to do false testimonies at church saying that they were cured from cancer. And they would really sell the part by crying and expressing gratitude and jumping up and down. The theatrics really worked and people got excited. And word of Jim Jones spread quickly through the town like holy fire. But this, my friends, this is where it gets even crazier. He began to gaslight unsuspecting people in the pews into thinking that they actually had cancer. He would call it a random name during his sermon and say, "Melissa, are you out there? God wants you to know that you have cancer." Then a nurse/actress would be ready to bring the naive victim on stage in front of the crowd, and the nurse would pretend to swab the victim's mouth, and while she was swabbing, she would drop a piece of chicken heart that she had hidden in her hand into the person's mouth. Of course, the person would gag because ew, gross. I mean, there's something foreign in your mouth. And out they would spit a raw piece of chicken. It really sounds very disgusting. Jones would then claim that by the grace of God and prayer, the cancer was removed from the person. And the nurse would then pick up the organ and show it to the audience and say, "Look at this piece of cancer. This child of God has been saved. And it's a miracle. Don't lie to us, Jim." And Jones would be yelling, "It's a miracle! Praise Jesus!" And Jim didn't even feel bad for what he was doing, because in his mind, he was doing what he needed to do in Jesus' name so that he could upgrade the church building and accommodate his growing congregation, which he eventually did. He bought a new church in Indianapolis that fit a capacity of 700 people. The lies and false miracles worked. Unbelievable. In 1965, Jones and his wife moved and relocated the church to Ukiah, California. Only about 60 people moved to Ukiah with Jones, so the move ended up being a difficult time for Jones and his family because it had waned in popularity, and his marriage was also suffering, and Jones began cheating on his wife with one of his loyal church followers. He knew that this would eventually come out to light, so he decided to tell his wife. And Marceline, had developed this crippling back problems that rendered her unable to walk, and she spent most of her time in bed in pain, and subsequently unable to have sex with Jim Jones. And so the way he explained it was that he had sexual desires that she couldn't meet. And he explained to her that he loved her, but he had needs. And she reluctantly accepted, since she didn't want to lose, the love of her life. And Jones went as far as telling all of his congregation about his extramarital affair, and was surprisingly honest for once. And his honesty was respected by his churchgoers, and they accepted Jim's sexual indiscretion. He could do no wrong in their eyes. Jones was basically starting all over again in California, so he had to really hustle to get his church to the level that it had been in Indianapolis. Jones took to the road again and began traveling into different towns such as Seattle and San Francisco to perform more miracles in hopes to attract new followers to his church in Ukiah. Jim had a way with words, the gift of gab, if you will. In order to form a deeper sense of connection, he would switch up his style like a chameleon, depending on the group he was talking to. For instance, if he was speaking with the black community, he would talk like this. And if he was speaking to a group of white hippies, he'd lean into the more metaphysical, woo-woo stuff and be all about, cosmic divine love and light. And if it was an Indian crowd, he would also talk like this. You know what I've always wondered? Why Indian people go like this? Why do they do that? If there's any Indian people out there who could enlighten me on this, I would love to know. I'm just kidding about that last one, but I'm sure he did. But you get the picture. He was adaptable, a master salesman, and boy, was this guy the entrepreneur. He had full merch for when he went on tour. He set up booths in towns to perform his miracles, and he had the genius idea of selling framed photos of himself at his miracle sermons for $5, which is about $40 in current currency if you account for inflation. He would tell people that his pictures helped protect them from sickness. And he was receiving so many donations that he decided to take all the money that he had been earning and started multiple businesses in which he enlisted crews of loyal devotees that would assist him with free labor to keep all his business ventures running smoothly. He had a printing press for printing out his monthly newsletter. He also had thrift stores that his followers kept stocked by donating any items and clothes that they no longer needed. He also asked his followers to work in his church for free, of course, to help as a contribution to the church. Some even signed over the deeds to their home and personal property as a tithe. Regardless of what Jim's ultimate motives were, he did do some good things, including food drives for impoverished neighborhoods, and even started a foundation that paid for poor kids' college tuition. So there are some nice folks out there who received a college tuition for free thanks to Jim Jones and his movement. His foundation even went as far as purchasing houses and remodeling them as dorm rooms so the kids that couldn't afford housing had a place to live while attending college. So at the height of his popularity, he began earning more and more money and opened 2 permanent churches, one in San Francisco and the other one in Los Angeles. As time went on, Jones's ideas began getting more extreme, and he started utilizing fear tactics to keep his church members in line. He started telling them that they had enemies in town that wanted to shut them down. He also wasn't very happy about people doing any extracurricular activities and did not want people spending money on anything deemed unnecessary. In fact, they should be donating that money to the church. So if someone wanted to go out to dinner, it's unacceptable. If they wanted to buy a Halloween costume for their kids, unacceptable. If they wanted to have a date night with their spouse, also unacceptable. In his eyes, that money should be going directly to the church. Jim even told his followers they shouldn't have romantic relationships because it would distract from their relationship with God. His followers didn't see a problem with that. They trusted his word and obliged whatever he told them to do. They fanatically started giving all their time and money to the church and even spent their free time doing chores such as cleaning, fixing the church, painting, etc. Jim eventually bought a dozen buses to travel alongside his followers from San Francisco to Los Angeles. And as time went on, all of the touring and sermons had Jim Jones exhausted. So he began using drugs to give him a boost of energy. He would do amphetamines during the day and downers during the night to help him sleep, I presume. And he naturally became more erratic, short-tempered, and his eyes looked wore out and bloodshot. So he began using his signature blackout sunglasses at all times to hide the clues of his drug abuse. He told his followers that the reason why he wore the glasses 24/7 is because he had a holy glow in his eyes. A holy fire, if you will. And if they looked at it directly, they could die. He put the fear of Medusa in them. And as outrageous as this sounds, his loyal followers believed him. The increased drug use made him paranoid, and he began telling the churchgoers that the government was after them and had even tapped their phones. He also began having countless sexual affairs with both women and men in his congregation and telling people it was part of their duty to serve God. Methamphetamine's a hell of a drug. And as time went on, eventually Jim's hunger for power and complete control over his congregation had come to a point where he had led followers to believe that they had to flee the country to get away from the evil government and FBI. He convinced them that all the powers that be wanted to hinder them from believing in Jesus Christ and the miracles that only he could perform. He hatched a plan to move to a place far away, a place called Guyana in South America. In Guyana, there were few laws to govern him, and it was a place rural enough that no one could hear their screams. In Guyana, he could have the ultimate power over his people, and just like the dictators he had always held such a fascination for, he told his followers that the government would soon implement martial law and that all Christians would be gunned down or placed in concentration camps. And if they chose not to flee the country with them, they would be left to succumb to the future that laid in store for them. This fear tactic caused his followers to also become paranoid, and many chose to make the exodus to Jonestown with him. In May of 1977, Jim Jones officially founded Jonestown, his promised land, and Jones would travel back and forth from Guyana, Los Angeles, and San Francisco so that he could distribute propaganda videos to his followers in the States. And the videos showed a literal utopia in Guyana, with lush lands and full of fruit and beautiful living spaces, and most of all, no meddling government to get in the way of their spiritual path. And people started getting excited, and more of the congregation flocked to Jonestown, and the reality was much different than expected upon arrival. There were armed guards, and as each member of the church would arrive in Jonestown, their passport would be taken and locked away. There were cottages set up for people to live in, but there simply weren't enough to accommodate the hundreds of people that decided to make the relocation. It may not have been the Holiday Inn, but Jim had maximum accommodations for himself, and unlike the people that he had begged to join him in his promised land, he had a nice cabin that was powered by the only generator in Jonestown, and he had a refrigerator, comfortable beds for him, his wife, and his two mistresses. The cottages were overcrowded, and there was a limited amount of water for showers and for consumption, and people were generally becoming unhappy. Everything began to change for the worse, and Jones had to approve of everything that happened in Jonestown. Even if you wanted to date someone, you would have to submit an application, and it was reviewed by Jones and his team for revisions and approval. And if the couple wanted to break up, they had to submit an application to Jim for that as well. And mail for congregation members that came in or out of Guyana was read by Jones and his team before given to the rightful owner or sent out. If anything negative was said in these outgoing letters about Jonestown, he would destroy the letter, and it would never go out, or he'd force the individual to rewrite the letter, leaving out anything negative about the Jonestown experience. Not only was it blistering hot and miserable, but on top of that, the money situation in Jonestown was getting even worse. More money was needed to further establish the compound and infrastructure. And in order to create a communal income for Jonestown, once again, Jim Jones put his loyal followers to work building wooden toy cars and trains, and the congregation would carve these toys and then sell them to toy manufacturers in larger surrounding cities. And while this helped a little, it just simply wasn't enough to keep this new town afloat. And regardless, Jones and his followers kept trekking forward and had nightly meetings where Jones would tell them his made-up version of the U.S. and world news. The people of Jonestown were growing tired of only eating peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and only drinking water and Flavor Aid. You're probably asking yourself, why wouldn't these people just leave? Well, remember, friends, when they arrived in Jonestown, he took their passports and identification. And despite the odds, a few followers actually were able to escape past the guards and flee back to the States. And once they made it home, these escapees began contacting the media, leading to sensational exposés in mainstream media regarding Jim Jones and the awful conditions people were living in back in Jonestown. Jim did not like this, not one bit. He began telling his followers, which at this point had amounted to about 900 men, women, and children, that the government was on their way to attack Jonestown and kill them all. And his statement was partially true. The American government was on the way, but not to annihilate the inhabitants. Rather, they were sending help to assist people that wanted to get out of Jonestown and back home to their friends and family in the States. Jim Jones called an emergency meeting with all of his Jonestown followers that day and told them that in a couple of hours, the U.S. government and the CIA were going to enter Jonestown and begin killing everyone, including the children. And instead of allowing these evil CIA people from killing them, they should actually take their lives and the lives of their children instead and die with dignity. Some of the followers agreed that this was a great idea, but others were scared and terrified of killing themselves and their kids. And whether they liked it or not, Jim Jones and his security prepared hundreds of drinks filled with poison. And everyone had to drink the poison as he preached on stage. When everyone drank the Flavor Aid, he informed them that the poison would take effect in about 40 minutes and they would die. He then said, "Just kidding. I was just testing you to see your loyalty." You would think that these people would be outraged, but they all accepted. They accepted this loyalty test and praised Jones. Many felt like it brought them closer as a group, and this was the moment that Jones realized that he could commit no wrong in the eyes of his followers and had complete control. Meanwhile, there were many people in the United States that were growing concerned because they hadn't heard from their family members in Jonestown. And these people began contacting the authorities and pleading with them to do some sort of a welfare check. And in November of 1978, U.S. Congressman Leo Ryan traveled to Guyana to inspect the living conditions in Jonestown and investigate the claims that, people were being held against their will. When he arrived, everyone was on their best behavior, and they had been coached by Jones. They all pretended to be healthy and happy and subsequently passed with flying colors. Unbeknownst to the U.S. government and Congressman Ryan, Jim Jones had been smuggling an ungodly amount of guns and ammunition into Jonestown and assembled an armed militia to guard Jonestown from anyone entering or leaving. And just as Congressman Leo Ryan was preparing to leave Jonestown the following day, and had planned on reporting that everything seemed normal. However, right as he was leaving Jonestown, a member slipped a note to him that read, "Help us get out of Jonestown." And with that, he offered to bring anyone back that did not want to stay. At this point, Jones was furious and sent his armed guards after Ryan and the group of would-be escapees. And just as they were making their way to the jet that would fly them back to the United States, Jones hired thugs, opened fire, and murdered 5 people, including the congressman, 3 members of the press, and wounded 11 others in the attack. Jones made an announcement on a loudspeaker for all to gather for an emergency meeting. During this meeting, he lied through his teeth as he explained that his guards had to shoot and kill the congressman in a retaliation from an attack perpetrated by Congressman Ryan's team. He told his followers that at any minute, military planes would be flying in to murder everyone in Jonestown. Now, if you've ever heard the term, "don't drink the Kool-Aid," well, then you know what's coming next. Side note, Jim was a cheapskate, so it wasn't actually, it was actually Flavor Aid. It wasn't even Kool-Aid, which is the less expensive version of the delicious fruit-flavored beverage we all grew up loving. Jim told everyone that the time had come for all to drink the poison. And believe it or not, most of them did. And the ones who refused, well, they were physically forced to ingest it anyway. Jim Jones audio recorded every sermon, and this meeting was no exception. So sadly, there is actually full recorded audio from this horrific event, and it's up on YouTube. And I wouldn't recommend that you listen to it. And I did, of course, for research purposes, and it was awful. I mean, it was just horrendous, and it made me feel a deep sense of sorrow. You can hear the children crying and screaming in agony, and as they feel their insides burning from the poison they were forced to ingest is just truly hellish. The next day, the Guyana Defense Force troops went into Jonestown and discovered Jim Jones and his mistress dead on stage, surrounded by an awful scene of 909 dead people, and that has now become known as the Jonestown massacre. I guess Jones didn't want to endure the pain and suffering of drinking poison, so he spared himself and one of his mistresses the trouble with a single shot to the head. The government seized his churches in San Francisco and Los Angeles, and the FBI later went through hundreds of hours of sermons and also discovered a suitcase in Jim Jones' cabin with $700,000 in it. 3 of his friends were allowed to escape Guyana, and they threw a suitcase into the jungle with $1 million in it. And then they fled. And at the time of Jim Jones' death, he had a total of over $7 million in multiple bank accounts, which brings us to the question, why wouldn't he give his followers a more humane living situation in Jonestown? Perhaps it was his plan all along to end his life along his devotees. I guess we'll never know. And out of the 909 bodies recovered, 409 of those people were unidentifiable. So basically, there's 409 nameless humans buried in a mass grave in Oakland, California right now. It's very sad. The moral of this story is not to follow anyone blindly. And I'm not saying there won't be an enlightened entity sent from the heavens above to promulgate a message from God. But along the way, we can be sure that there will be plenty of false prophets attempting to gain your trust for their own personal power and monetary gain. And as I promised, here are 5 tips to keep you safe from these snake oil salesmen. Here's the first tip. If anyone expects your blind obedience, this may be an indicator that they want you to lose your personal sense of identity. Number 2, if they humiliate others, if your spiritual leader engages in shaming tactics to any outside groups who hold opposing views rather than having, civil discourse, this could be a telltale sign of a cult leader who's afraid of being challenged. Number 3, sense of entitlement. If your leader engages in hypocritical practices or believes you owe them anything for their time or their services, this might be a red flag. Number 4, many cult leaders will utilize enforcers to ensure compliance of their followers. Oftentimes, they'll exhibit favoritism for specific group members as a manipulation tactic in order to create these enforcers who will do their bidding by ensuring confirmation bias among peers within the group. Number 5, if your leader claims to have magical powers, such as healing on demand through prayer, exorcising demons, speaking in tongues, psychic abilities, or making claims of communication with entities, there is a strong chance you are being bamboozled. If David Blaine can make us think he levitates, surely there are people who can use tricks to make you think they have special powers. Well, there you have it, folks. Make sure to be careful out there. We don't want you ending up a victim like these unfortunate folks that followed Jim Jones to their demise. Thanks for watching. Hope you liked it. If you did, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and leave me a comment below if you have any suggestions of any stories, anything that you'd like me to cover. This time that you and I are spending together really means a lot to me because I know that you could be doing anything else, but instead you're here with me, and that truly means the world to me. Thank you so much. Have a good day. Oh my God, Jim Jones!